Welcome to the Bronx African American History Project. My name is Stephen Payne, librarian and archivist at the Bronx County Historical Society, and I'm here with Brenda Beattie Neuman, a retired real estate broker who spent a good part of her life in the Bronx and has the distinction of single-handedly landmarking the building that we've been doing a series of these oral history interviews about, the Coops, or United Workers Cooperative Colony, located at 2700 Bronx Park East. So we begin these oral history interviews by asking, why don't you tell us a little bit about your family, their background, and how you ended up in the Bronx?
Oh, I ended up in the Bronx. Okay. Well, I ended up in the Bronx because I was adopted by a couple who had an apartment in the Coops. And when they adopted me, I was brought into the Coops. And I was 5 years old. So I lived in the Coops from the time I was 5, which would be 1940, till about 1986.
Wow.
So, and then I moved on and went to various other places. What else did you ask me?
So
That's how I got there.
that's how you got there. Do you know much about your adopted parents and what they were doing before they moved to the Bronx, or did they share that with you?
No, I don't. No, I
Okay,
really don't know too much about them. But in about 1984 or so, I went on a quest to find my real family, and which I did. And I
sure.
got my mother, my father, and all my brothers and sisters.
Yeah, and why don't you some of these points we already talked about in our first conversation, but just to have it on record, why don't you talk a little bit about your birth parents and their background and all what you were able to find out?
Okay. My birth parents, my mother was a Russian Jew, and my father was a Shinnecock Indian, and they have their little tribe out on Long Island. And at that time, that's all I knew about them until about 1986 when I went out and decided I wanted to find them. And they don't make it easy for you. It's a
Yeah,
very hard task.
for
And it
sure.
takes a lot of phone calls and a lot of work. But eventually I was able to find them. I found my mother, and my father was my mother, and my sisters and my brothers were down in Florida. And I have another sister that's in Brooklyn, and her whole family. So I think it's very important for adopted children to be able to find their family. It sort of completes them. And you
Absolutely.
know as to who you are and what you did and why you got your blue eyes and etc. So I think it's very important, Abby. And of course, that family has grown. And I, of course, had 2 daughters of my own that were raised in the Coops.
Sure.
And they went to school there. They had their friends there. And they had children of their own. But by this time, they moved out of the Coops. So I have 3 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
My
Yeah.
great-grandchildren live in Florida. So this grandparent is a wonderful thing. Like I'm talking to you. You may be
Yeah,
miles and
yeah.
miles away.
Absolutely.
Having a conversation at 10 o'clock. You would have to get up out of your house. I'd have to get up out of my house and have it over. We go about our business and we don't have to travel. This is a wonderful thing,
It
grandparent.
is.
Yes, it is
Absolutely.
a wonderful thing. The screen is big enough and it's nice.
And where are all of your children? You said your grandchildren are in Florida. Your great grandchildren are in Texas. Is that right?
In Texas, yes. And my grandson and daughter are in Connecticut. And my other daughter lives in the Dover Plains in New York.
Sure.
So they're scattered, but we got this grandparent, so it works fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. That's great. And were you able to find out if your birth parents, where they met or anything about their relationship or?
Yes. Um, my father, I guess my birth father, and my mother, they were all raised in Brooklyn.
Okay, I see. Yeah, yeah.
And they were all friends in Brooklyn, and they all worked in, so they all knew each other.
Sure.
So even when my mother married, she didn't marry my father.
Mm.
But when she did marry, she also married someone from their group.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah.
Okay? And because she was a Russian Jew, which was white, and it was in the year of 1935, and I'm not of the same race as she, or color, it was
Sure.
very difficult for her to keep me. So that's why she gave me up for adoption. And but she waited for about 5 years to do that because I was about four, I was about five. She gave me up in 1939, so I was about four. So she
Yeah,
tried to hold on to me as long as she possibly could.
yeah.
And the state agency just told her she couldn't hold on to me any longer because I had to find a home for me to go to school.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah. And
You know,
so did your mom know your adopted parents at all, or that was just through the state agency?
through the state agency.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Now,
and about
excuse me, I just heard a buzzer, and I realized I didn't charge this last night. So if
okay,
we go out, just call me on the phone, and we'll continue this on the phone.
okay, sure, sure,
That's
sure, yeah,
right. Just in case something happens, I want you to realize. Okay.
sure, sure. Um, Great. And about your adopted parents, what did they do for a living?
Uh, my adopted mother was a practical nurse, and my adopted father worked in a retail store outfit. So that's
Sure.
what we did.
And did they ever share with you why they chose to move into the Coops or
Well, I have the feeling they chose it because they heard it was wide open spaces, was safe as the park, and they probably just felt it was a safe place to go,
sure,
where people of color could live quietly without being harmed, and and most of the African Americans, the elder ones, had come up from the South or knew people in the South and knew the horrors of the South. So I think safety was in everybody's mind. And
absolutely,
it
yeah,
was built in a very safe area, that
sure,
Bronx Park, and it was very safe.
absolutely. Do you know where they lived in New York before they moved to the Coops, or they never shared that with
No, no, I don't.
you?
I don't know anything about them.
Sure, sure. Okay, and you were their only child growing up.
Yes,
That's right.
yes. So I'm
Um,
only child, so I don't share very well.
uh,
Children go
and
to
do you remember which elementary school you went to in the Bronx?
the PS 96.
PS 96. And where's that located, or where was that
That was
located?
at Olinville Avenue and Barker, which was about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 or 6 blocks, long blocks from the Coops. It's in
Sure.
walking distance. And then I went to, well, that only went up to the 6th grade at the time. And then I went to PS 89, which went from 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And then I went to Christopher Columbus High School. Went for the 4 years at Christopher Columbus High School. And then I went to Pace University and got my degree from Pace in accounting.
Yeah, great.
Mhm.
And what was your experience like in the public school system in New York?
Well, at that time, the school system was pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wasn't overcrowded. Our school wasn't overcrowded. Of course, it was all white at that
Yeah,
time, except for the 10 families. I figured when I did it, it would go over the list. I come up with 15 families. But then
yeah,
again, if someone says 10, it's because they know that 10 moved in before the other 6, which I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
The list, but I don't know. So there may have been just 10, and then 6 more moved in. But basically, the list I gave you were the people I know. So maybe it was 16 that lived on the top floor.
Yeah.
But the basis was all the African Americans lived on the top floor. That's the basis.
Yeah.
10 or 20, they all lived on the top floor. So, what did you ask me?
About the public schools. So it was all white, the schools you went to. Were the teachers, did they favor the white kids openly, or how are the teachers with dealing with the African American children?
I don't think at that time we could. At that time, I don't think we could. We really knew of anything to look like. All we knew was that we were communists, and this was the difference.
Sure.
So when they practiced the fire alarms, remember they used to have the fire drills?
Yeah.
When they practiced the fire drills and everybody ran underneath the table, we didn't.
Oh, wow.
We wanted the Russians to come.
Yeah.
So we didn't go under the table.
Yeah.
We had a little heat up. Angie Dickinson would come into the school, and they would, chastise Charlotte because Charlotte wouldn't go underneath the table. So all the mothers would march, and of course we put Angie up front, and we didn't have to go underneath the table because we are, we're not afraid of the Russians.
And did you take May Day off and some of the other worker holidays?
Absolutely. Oh, we were all off May Day, and we were, that's right, no problem.
So you had a pretty good experience in the public schools then, huh?
Yeah. You were isolated because you were the only few African Americans in the school.
Sure.
And the other children didn't know how to treat you because, they didn't have African Americans in their community,
Yeah.
So it wasn't an easy situation.
Sure.
And I think I think when we integrated the schools in the 60s, the African American kids probably experienced the same thing. They were bused into an area where they were not, people didn't know how to be friends with them, and they couldn't really make friends because they had to get back on the bus and come back home.
Sure.
They couldn't play with anybody after school in their community because they had to get on the bus and come home. And it wasn't the same community that they went to school in. So
Absolutely.
I guess it had its same kind of drawbacks. Isolated things that people don't think about,
Sure.
And so you learn to do things on your own and be on your own,
Yeah, and that's pretty much what you had to do in the public schools, huh?
Yes.
Do you remember any of the neighborhood kids, either in the coops or beyond the coops, the white kids who would give you or any of your friends problems ever?
No, because any of the white kids who spoke to you were friends. They wouldn't give you any problems.
Sure.
The only ones that gave you problems was the Italians.
Yeah.
Who lived up Allerton Avenue, who decided every now and then to come down and beat up the boys from the Coops.
Yeah.
That was the only time there was problems in the neighborhood.
Yeah, there's one person that we've interviewed for this didn't live in the Coops. I think he actually lived more in Morrisania, but he went to a Vander Childs, and I think he would have been in high school in like the 50s. So, but he remembers being chased home by some Italian kids in the Allerton neighborhood, on a regular basis. So he'd have to run home, and that's got to be like at least 3 miles to where he lived. But yeah. Tom went to Evander Childs, he said as well, but he didn't remember ever running into the Italian kids.
Yeah.
But yeah. And did you play music or anything like that in high
I
school
played the
or?
piano, but I didn't play it in high school. I just
Oh,
learned
okay,
to
okay,
play piano, and I played piano for about 10 years, and then I gave it up.
sure. Did you all have a piano or you used
Yeah,
the
no,
piano of
we had a
friends?
piano. No, we had a piano.
Yeah, yeah.
We had it.
Um, and were there parts of the Bronx that you knew that you shouldn't go to because you know there were it was dangerous for you to go to, or did you go pretty much anywhere in the Bronx?
I didn't, well, in growing up in the Coops, which I guess a lot will tell you, we had everything that we needed there. We
Sure.
had all our stores, we had the playground, we had the park, we had the zoo, we had the botanical gardens, we had all our schools, and we had the benches to meet for friends. What more did we need? So
Yeah,
we didn't
yeah, yeah,
go outside.
yeah. No need
So
to.
when we got to be teenagers, the talk was there's a world out there that we never went out to experience because we didn't have to.
Sure.
So, so it wasn't a question of going to other parts of the Bronx, you know.
Yeah,
It, we just stayed right there because we had everything.
yeah,
And we
absolutely.
just got, then again, we just cut ourselves off from the rest of the world and
Sure.
isolated ourselves. And as I said, we had everything. We didn't have to go anywhere. Of course, when I got older, when I got much older in my 20s, and I met different people because who went to work,
Yeah.
and or even a little bit before that. When I was about 20, I met a group of people outside of the Coops. Then I went to what was called the South Bronx,
Sure, sure.
so that I could see other areas, and they were all African American, so I didn't have to worry about being chased or anything.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and uh, what are some of the things that you do for fun, I guess, around the coops? Because, like you said, you didn't really go elsewhere in the Bronx, at least when you were a teenager. What are some of the things you do for fun?
Well, really, we just hung out. Um, when you're busy with schoolwork, and I just, you come to think about it, I don't think we did. Well, we would roller skate in the streets, which was a great deal of fun. We had all those hills. There were no cars. Remember when I was growing up, we had very few cars.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Car came down once every hour. You know, so we used to skate. And
Sure.
we found somebody that was a little bit scary on skates and didn't skate very well. So one would take her hand, and another would take the other hand, and run her down the hill and let her go. So they would funny this, and she would go down screaming, with her hand flailing. It was just hysterical. You see what funny it is? They got back up, would grab her again, each by the hand, and run her and let her go. Yeah, that's what we did for fun. And then in the wintertime, we would sled ride in the streets, and right on
Sure.
Arno Avenue was a tremendous hill that went all the way down Arno Avenue, and then was so fast we'd go right across Bronx Park East. So we went way down the street, and the thing would go right across Bronx Park East. And fortunately, cars came once every hour, so we were pretty safe during that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was it. But after school, we'd go roller skating, or we'd just basically hang out. There was a thing called, we had concerts like every Friday night in the village at Washington Union Square.
Sure, sure.
Union Square. there was a school. I think it was probably in Irving, Washington Irving High School. It might have been in their auditorium. They would have concerts, and then we would go there, and we'd have folk singing. You know, we have
Yeah.
Seeger, or we have other people who do folk singing there. So that was it. That was basically what it is.
Yeah, yeah. Did you ever go to any music clubs much or anything like that,
No,
either in the Bronx or around New York?
no, no.
Did you all listen to music much in your family?
Yes, my adopted mother liked classical, so we
Okay,
had
sure.
classical all the time.
Yeah.
And then we
And
go
then
to
the folk
concerts.
singing on Friday.
Yeah, and then we go to concerts.
Yeah,
You know, classical concerts. Yeah.
sure. Any jazz ever or anything like that, or that wasn't
Yes, Henry liked jazz,
sure.
and he liked Nat King Cole, so we had those records playing all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Did you go to Harlem much ever for anything? Tom apparently used to go there at least once a week to the Harlem Opera House.
Oh,
Uh, yeah, yeah. When he was growing up, anyway.
yeah, no, I didn't at that time go to Harlem.
Sure.
Now I found some very nice restaurants, Sylvia. Now I hang out and now I go to Sylvia's.
Yeah, 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 yeah. There's some great
Yeah,
restaurants there for sure.
but then I didn't know. He stayed right there
Yeah,
in the 4 blocks of the Coops. That was it.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Was there a movie theater close to you that you ever went to?
2 blocks away, 3 blocks away from the Allerton Avenue Theater.
The Allerton Avenue
So
Theater,
we
that's
went
right.
1, 2, cross White Plains Road, 3, 4 blocks.
4
So we never
blocks.
go far for anything, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got
The movie
everything
was
you need
25
right there.
cents. The movie was 25 cents, so that was it. That was nice.
Yeah, yeah, and it was still where you could go all day, right?
Yeah,
you'd
but not
pay,
nice. I hate it when they did this other way. You could,
yeah,
the thing would keep rolling on and on and on and
yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. And what about what kinds of foods do you remember eating growing up?
on. Well, regular, nothing special. Except after I was able to have my own apartment and cook, I sort of tend towards the Jewish cooking, which I happen to like to this very day. Chicken soup with
Yeah,
balls and potato pancakes, and the various things that I like. Chicken in the pot, you know, I lean
sure.
towards there. But basically, it was just like good pork chops, lamb chops, steaks, potatoes, nothing
Yeah,
fancy.
nothing fancy.
Yeah.
Uh, any dish that was your favorite growing up, or maybe still is your favorite?
No, I really didn't have a favorite dish.
Sure, sure.
Mhm.
Um, let's see. Oh, as far as your adopted parents go, did they have any other relatives that lived in the Coops or in New York that you'd visit?
No, most of their relatives were down south.
Okay,
Henry's family
sure.
came from Philly, so his family was in Philadelphia, and Betty's family came from Richmond, Virginia. So
Okay,
basically, everybody was in the south.
sure.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, I think we'll go ahead and move on to some more specific questions about the Coops, unless there's anything else in general about the Bronx that you'd like to share.
No, that's about it.
Well, actually, another question just occurred to me. What uh, what about growing up in the Bronx most shaped your life going forward?
Growing up in the Bronx, I really don't know that shaped my life.
Yeah, is there anything that you identify as being kind of uh, tied to your Bronx roots that shaped who you are?
I'm just trying to think. No, I think growing up in the Coops, but not growing up in the
Sure,
Bronx. Uh,
sure.
the only thing I can say, which is I don't know, a Bronxite can always pick another Bronx, find another Bronxite. And I've often found that very, not strange, but works that way. I could be somewhere and talk to someone, and I say to them, "Do you come from the Bronx?" And they say, "Yes." There's something about Bronxites. Is
Yeah,
that we have a quality, and I don't know whether it's a friendliness or the way we speak to people, but um, somehow a Bronxite will come out of a crowd and do something, either help you with something or speak to you or say something to you. And the minute they do, I say, "You come from the Bronx?" And they say, "Yes." I don't know what that is that shapes us, but I don't know if coming from the Bronx did it. Maybe only coming from the groups, I could say, but not from.
sure. But no, I know what you're talking about. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I've lived in the Bronx now, I guess almost 10 years, but I've, it's my home and I can't imagine living anywhere else at this point. Because there is something about, I don't know, something about the Bronx for sure.
Yeah, from
At
Bronx
least at its
people.
best,
Yeah, from Bronx
Yeah,
people. You can go
yeah,
somewhere and right away something will happen. That person will do something. You know, either help you or say something to you, and you're saying, "You come from the Bronx." Yeah,
That's
I
funny.
can tell there's a quality here I can pick up. You know?
Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the Coops because you spent so many years there. There's so much we can touch on with the
Okay.
Coops specifically. Um, so you can feel free to talk at length about
Mhm.
any of these questions.
Really.
Um, but here's just a general one for you. How did you and your family fit into the wider community of the Coops?
My family didn't.
Okay, sure.
Right. Okay. I just got a strip across that said I've been videoing now for 30 minutes, but I'd like to continue. So I had to press.
Oh,
So I had to press
sure.
yes. So that's where it was a lull there. What was
Yeah.
your question? How did they
How did
fit?
you and your family
They didn't.
fit in?
They
And
didn't. They only leaned towards the African Americans um, in the Coops. They really had nothing to do with the white community.
sure.
So that was that. And how did they fit in? They didn't fit in. They didn't do anything. Excuse me for a second. Just give me a moment. Hello. Okay. Okay.
There we go.
Mm-mm. They didn't.
So,
That was your question. How did they fit in? They didn't.
yeah, they didn't.
They avoided them. Come
Yeah.
to think about it,
And
they had Betty had only one white friend, and that and that is I don't know if she called. I don't know if they considered themselves white, but they're very light skin. And
yeah,
but Beverly lived out of the Coops. I don't know how they met, but it wasn't anybody from the Coops. There was only one white person I
sure.
knew. But no, that had nothing to do with the white community at all.
Yeah. And how many other black families did you say you remember? You already mentioned this before, but just so we
Mhm.
have it on
Mhm.
record again.
How many black families? What?
We're in the Coops,
But I said about 16. We went up on our list. Came to about
about 16.
16. Yes,
Um,
that's out of
and
728 now.
I know that's fair. very small percentage, and
But we're
they all lived
we're
on,
very progressive. We let everybody in.
but put them on the top
Yes,
floor.
and as long as it's not too many.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
16 was just about the number, I guess.
yeah. And did that number change over time at all,
Co-op
or?
City opened up, then it became 95% Black and African American. And all the white community
Yeah.
moved out. The only one left
Yep.
was Ingrid Bill Taylor,
Sure.
and I don't know if Angie was alive at that time or whether she had already died. I'm not quite sure. But if she was alive, Angie would have been there.
Yeah.
But no, the majority of the white community left.
Sure. And as far as the kind of original Black families in the Coops, did many of them stick around for a long time, or were you one of the few?
Yes, no, they stayed. They
Yeah.
stayed a very long time. In fact, I know when, let me look in, I know when Bill Taylor stayed. Tyke moved out because of his girls, basically.
Sure.
He took his girls, but he took his mother with him so she could watch the girls. So his mother went with him. Angie stayed. The Graysons, they moved out, but not to co-op. So they moved out later.
Okay,
Reggie
yeah.
stayed. Williams stayed. The Gibsons stayed. The Jones stayed. I don't know when the Percys moved out, but they moved out. Audrey Percy and Frank Mackenzie stayed. So a lot of them stayed. It was just the Jewish community. Bailey definitely stayed. James stayed. Bryson moved out, but he didn't go to Co-op City. I don't know where they went. Bradford stayed for a long time, and then they eventually moved out, but wasn't to Co-op City, so they was moved out years after Co-op City was built.
I see.
They moved out, I'll tell you when, they moved out after Angie died. So if we get that,
she died in
when did she?
1981.
Then they moved out because Selma told me that Angie died.
Oh,
so that's how I know
I see.
Selma Bradford was still in the coop when Angie died.
Wow, I see.
On Allerton Avenue, walking, I was shopping, and she stopped to tell me that Angie had died. So she was still in the coops.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
She didn't move. And Al Woods, I don't know when he and Peppy moved out, but it was way after. Also, maybe 1980 something, maybe. So the African Americans stayed in Co-op City. It was the Jewish community that moved out.
Yeah, and Tom said that he thinks his mom finally moved out maybe in the early 70s or something, but so she was there for a long time too. But just kind of did her own thing, I think. And you said you remember Queen Mother Moore or Audley Moore, seeing her walk around sometimes. You didn't really know her too well, though. I
didn't know her too well, and I wouldn't have been able to recognize her at all. I knew Tommy, but I never knew her. And if I didn't meet her or saw her, I really don't know. Might have been once or twice. I really don't know what she looked like.
Sure.
But I heard her name all the time, Audley Moore.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't remember what she looks like.
What was it like? I mean, you mentioned it a little bit with your parents avoiding most of the white families, but what was it like being one of only a handful of African American families in the Coops?
I think you just felt isolated. You didn't feel welcome.
Yeah.
You know, and it was very strange because you had people who walked around, you know, saying that you're your friends, and they don't act it. So it's hard to sort of put your head around that when you're growing up.
Yeah.
Except it produced a lot of anger. I think it produced more anger in the fellas than it
I
did,
see.
because there were not too many African American teenagers. Me, Eloise, Jane. Joyce was older than I, so we never hung out, even though she always claimed she was younger than me. But I said, no, Joyce, you're older. No,
You're older. Yeah, yeah,
she
yeah.
always said she was younger. I said, no, 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 no. So, but Joyce was older, so she had friends outside, and she was a model, so she was doing her own thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So there weren't that too many African American girls, you know. But I think it was the fellas that felt it more, because they couldn't date the girls. They couldn't date the Jewish girls.
Yeah, yeah. Do you remember so Taiki, of course, had a relationship with
Yes,
a white woman from the Coop, right?
right, right.
Were there any other black boys who did that, or was Taiki the only one?
No, it was Tanky, it was Reggie.
Reggie, uh-huh.
Let's see if there's any other. Tanky, Reggie, maybe the only two that ventured out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, Bradford, the daughter did. Jackie married a fellow who's white,
Okay, I see. Yeah.
and uh, Jimmy married Jimmy Jurgens. Heather was white, but they came in as a couple. They
Sure,
came there
sure.
as a couple, and Hartwell and Willa. Oh no, they were both black, so no, that wouldn't be it. So, no,
Yeah,
as I said, people like Tommy and the others felt it because they couldn't date the girls. So
yeah,
they
yeah.
felt that as a real, slap in the face. Um,
Sure.
and I guess if you know that and you can't date the ones that you know are they're not necessarily in the group, but you know that their parents are left wing and part of the progressive movement, um, and you get rejected, you just can't date them. Then if there are any other white girls in the groups, you don't try, because you don't know if they're progressive movement, and you don't know you're going to get rejected. And
Yeah, yeah.
but remember, it's very 35, 40 was still very close to the South. It's in the
Sure.
South, so the white guys, like, don't want to get too involved. They may get too messy, because who knows, like the things like Emmett Till and things in the South. So they're very cautious. So if they want to go out with a white woman, they want to make sure the family, I guess it's in favor of it, so they don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, yeah,
These
yeah.
families were not in favor of it. So that their heads
Yeah,
around, they're very angry. The African American men were very, very angry.
yeah. What happened with Taiki? You told me before, but just so we get it on record, because he had a pretty bad experience with his wife's family. Is that right?
Yeah, they didn't like him at all.
Yeah,
And they didn't want her first daughter by her first husband to even get involved with him. So they made a point to move out of the coops and as far away from Sonny and Tyke. And didn't want,
yeah,
like, Ellen would be almost the same age as Donna. So they'd be in the same class, maybe, and they'd definitely be in the same school.
yeah.
And the grandmother didn't want any of that association.
I see. I
Then she didn't, at that time, she didn't know how to, I guess, explain to her daughter, Ellie, why she have half sisters who are a different color than she is. So she didn't want
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
involved in any of that. So she moved out to Long Island, and that was the end of that.
And was she the one who set Shiva
Yeah,
for her
most of
daughter, or
them
that
do.
they all?
Yeah, most of them do.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
Most of them,
Oh
yes.
my God.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, what about the clubs at the Coops? We've already talked about how Tom mentioned there was only one club that the black teenagers, he said, could get, the Carmen Jones Club. Did you ever participate in anything that the
No,
Carmen
no. In
Jones
fact,
Club
it's the
did?
first time I'm hearing about them having a Common Jones Club. They kept it very quiet, but no, no. Most of the clubs were from the other guys, the white fellas had their clubs. I didn't know there was another club in there.
Yeah, I'm not sure when it started, because I know Carmen Jones, the musical, was in, I don't know, maybe 1946 or 47. But Tom said they started the club after the movie, which must have come out in the 50s. So he must have already been in his 20s by the time um, the club started, if it was named after the movie, like you said it was. So I'm not sure
You
um,
know, when it
the
was,
time,
yeah,
but yeah, the clubs were pretty much exclusively white. You
yes,
said, huh?
yeah,
Um, and they were pretty much sports and social
yeah. There were social
clubs.
clubs and there were sports, and uh,
Yeah,
I mean, it was a nice idea. And then when you read about it, it says, they had their clubs, and it says, "Oh, that's wonderful," because they had about lots of clubs, and they were in the basement in empty rooms,
yeah,
and you had a place to hang out.
yeah, yeah,
So it
yeah.
was nice. They had a place to hang out. So that was good. On a rainy day when you couldn't sit on the benches, you would go down to your club room, and they had parties down there. And we didn't have drugs during that time, so we didn't too
Sure,
much
sure.
concern about drugs. Whiskey, liquor, they probably were drinking, but drugs were not
Yeah,
a part of their group.
yeah, yeah. You hung out primarily on the benches,
Yeah,
huh?
I hung out on the benches, so with
Yeah,
Ethel and Rosalind and the others were down, Tina, that's what everyone would do. If you were finished, whatever you had to do, you go outside, you'd be on the benches.
I see. And what would you all do on the benches? Just talk
Oh,
and
you talk,
that kind of
you
thing?
talk, you played card games, you played checkerboard games. Um, you can, yeah, basically talk, gossip about other people. And some would have a deck of cards, so they play cards. You straddle the bench, put your legs across the bench, and then you play
Yeah,
your cards. Or they have a checkerboard, play checkers. Uh, or you would, let's go in and play handball. So maybe three or four you get up off the bench, go in the playground, play handball, come back, sit back on the bench, walk to the candy store, get a soda, or have a sandwich at the candy store. We had everything there. I mean, you didn't have to go.
yeah, yeah,
And because we were the left wing and the progressive movement, um, certain things we didn't care about. Clothing. We all wore pea jackets and dungarees. I mean, and no one wore makeup. You all wore your hair back. So, we didn't be,
yeah,
the left wing and progressives are not that fancy. So we didn't think
yeah,
about
yeah,
going
yeah.
down to Macy's and bargains and buying shinier shoes or fancy blouses. That was not in our, well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, in what you've already said, obviously there was a lot of silent racism that went on in the Coops, but do you remember uh, any instances of, completely outright, out in the open racism that would happen at the Coops?
Um, I can't. I really can't. I know there was an incident that I don't remember what it was. It was an incident that occurred. And I know when you have these kind of things occurring, very serious, very serious. They get you, you're the one that made the remark, they get you in a group. You sit in the middle of the circle, and everyone goes around and tells you what you did wrong and why it was wrong. And you've got to understand that. That's your
So, was it primarily children that would happen to, or did that ever happen to adults?
It happened to adults too, but mainly
Okay, yeah.
teenagers, because I remember having once with a teenager. I can't think what the situation was, but I remember sitting around in that group. I remember them sitting around in that group. I should have known then
Yeah.
at that age to walk away from this mess. But as far as out and outright, it wouldn't be out and outright because that would be against everything they believed in, and nobody was going to get caught being
Yeah.
against everything they believed in, you know.
Yeah.
But I can't really think of anything.
Sure. When did the practice of, publicly shaming people for racist remarks, when did that end? When the white families moved out, or before that?
And then some of this ended after the McCarthy era.
Yeah.
Broke up the Communist Party and broke up these people, and the FBI got most of them. Then the thing started quieted down, and then, as I said, when Co-op City, and you had an influx of African Americans and Hispanics, and you had lots of them, that broke up the Coops altogether.
Sure.
Different ball game in the Coops.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Do you remember ever hearing discussions from white Koopniks about fears that too many people of color were moving in or anything like that? I
guess when Co-op City opened up and was an influx of African Americans, I could very well understand them saying, yes, I could. They never discussed it in front of me, but I tell you, yes, that discussion must have gone on.
I'm sure.
I'm sure that discussion went on. And that meant that those that were left were getting ready to go.
Yeah. I remember even Pete said he remembers, I guess this would have been in the 40s. He remembers some people resisting the idea of more Black families moving in. There were only, like you said, maybe 15 or 16, but some of the white Koopniks didn't want even more Black families to move in than a small amount, because they said, well, where will the white families go when when they get old? They're going to be kicked out, that kind of thing. But when you have 750 families and only 16 of them are Black.
Yeah, how frightened they were. 16 was frightening
already.
Number. You put 20 in, you're going to have a mess. Yes.
Yeah.
I can believe that conversation went on.
Yeah. Were there any white Koopniks that you remember that called out other white Koopniks for the kind of hidden racism, or everyone was kind of?
No, I don't think they called them out.
Yeah.
They probably didn't all believe the same thing.
Yeah. For sure.
And
no,
and they all knew it, so they weren't going to call each other out because I got something on you too. You think it that way?
For sure.
Yeah. No, I think no. I believe that. It's I believe that is exactly what they were thinking.
Yeah. And you mentioned in our previous conversation about just little things that you might not have even realized at the time, like not being invited into apartments or not being invited in or not being invited to bar bat mitzvahs, things like that. Um, yeah, why don't you say a
Well,
bit more
no, it
about
just
your
only
experience?
just those a few things that when speaking to you, we've gone through this. I've gone through this conversation more than one. I did it when Utopia was being made, and they came and they sat with me for hours a couple of times for Utopia, you know. And
Sure.
so I'm sorry, I went off thinking about another answer. What was your question?
Oh, I was just asking you to say a bit more about your experience of not
Oh,
being
yeah.
invited into.
So, and none of these things came to mind till I spoke to you, and then
Yeah,
and then it came to mind. All they talk about was friendly and how wonderful one big family. And I said to myself, I don't remember going to anybody's bar mitzvah or any of the fellas like Tyke or Percy or Tommy being invited to somebody's wedding. But ask them when you speak to them, have you ever been invited to any of their weddings? Ask them, did you invite
yeah,
any of these people to your wedding? You know?
yeah,
And even when they grow up as adults, do you ever have them as a barbecue?
yeah,
Okay? So that just dawned on me. So all this idea about oh, we played ball with Tommy. There was no distinction. We all played together, and as one big family. But underneath, they knew they were not inviting them to functions that really matter. We're hoping that
sure,
Tommy didn't
sure.
realize that. Tommy
Yeah,
didn't know
yeah,
he was
yeah,
not going, you know. And I think that
yeah,
the
yeah.
anger of the black male was that they knew something was wrong, but they couldn't put their hands on it. Because as I said, it took me all this time to realize all this talk about how friendly they are, and it's making me uncomfortable. But I don't know why. Why? Because I know they're lying. Because we were never invited to anything. To
Yeah,
graduations,
yeah,
because some of them graduated from City College, some might graduate from Brooklyn Law. Nobody was invited to graduation parties,
wow,
you know.
wow. I
So they're a
know.
bunch of phonies.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're in a place where you claim to have dealt with racism, but you're actually just sweeping it under the rug, then it becomes hard to talk
Right.
about it. Uh, and people don't even, it's hard to connect all the memories together because it's drilled in you so much that there's no racism here. There's no racism here, but
You
sure
know, when you
enough.
think about it hard enough, long enough, and often enough, I guess you're.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause, I mean, that's definitely one thing that came up in Tommy's interview as well is, I asked him what it was like being a part of, one of the handful of African American families, and he said, well, we were pretty much completely separate, and he said we were a little segregated
Mhm.
ourselves. Um, it's a different kind of segregation in New York compared to Mississippi, for instance, but there was still a kind of
See,
segregation at
that
play.
segregation is easier to handle. As more brutal it may be, it's easier to handle because you're going to drink from a segregated faucet. You can't go
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
certain place. Here, they're segregating you by quiet. We're going to give you an apartment, but it's going to be on the top floor. Yes,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
we say that we're all together, but we don't invite you to parties or to family events. Excuse me.
yeah,
So that's harder to hit. That's harder to. So it's harder to talk to say, you know, you are a racist when they. What do you mean I'm racist?
yeah. Sure,
We take an apartment.
for
I
sure.
mean, we all live together, you know.
Yeah,
So yeah, come to think about it, it wasn't until I had my conversation with you that I said, That's the issue. That's the problem.
Yeah,
That was,
yeah,
they
because
pulled them out on that one. And nobody did
yeah,
because we weren't thinking about that.
absolutely. And so much of history is people who ended up on top, going back and making history all rosy for themselves. Um, but hopefully, the more people we interview from the Coops, the more realistic picture we can get of things.
And
Don't want
the
to.
question is, because I was just reading something on Facebook where someone wrote in this very thing. Oh, we played basketball with Roger, and I played this, and I did that, and I did the other. And he did it 4 years ago. It's still there. And I was going to answer it just this way because now it dawned on me, and I said, oh, wait a minute, maybe I'll let it go with them because it's 4 years. Maybe I need to go back to read it,
Yeah, yeah.
But I just think that in all their talking, what I wanted to ask them is, have they ever asked an African American what it was like in the coop, mowing them?
Yeah.
There he is, a
Oh.
beautiful cat.
He's trying to get it.
Mowing them will tell you no. They never asked any of them what it was like living in the coops. Never did.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They think they're doing them a favor, and they should appreciate
it. Yeah. Isn't it so nice to invite 16 out of 750 families? But like you were saying, unknown to them, they actually ended up doing you a favor because you didn't get asthma on the top floor, right?
Right.
Unknown
how
to
they
them.
control that was you'd have to go to the office to get the apartment, and then you had to be interviewed by one of the tenants. He lived on the second floor. I can't think of his name right. I'll think of his name later. And he lived on the second floor. So if he didn't approve of you, then you didn't get the apartment. So they had very good control of how many African Americans were going to come in.
I see. And was there a tenants council?
Excuse me?
Was there a tenants council, or it was only this one person?
There was a tenant association.
Okay. Were any members of Black families a part of the tenants association, or it was all white?
No, you could join. You could go.
Okay. Anyone
can join, but Minnie Calmus controlled it. If the landlord wanted to raise the rent, she was pulled the rent strike. If he didn't give hot water, she'd pull another rent strike. So she always controlled it.
Who was that again? I sorry.
Minnie Calmus. Right.
Minnie Calmus.
Minnie Calmus, and she always controlled it. And then in about 1981, 82, around that area, I got a phone call from one of the big community organizations. And they said, Brenda, we want to bring in, they showed me a plan. They wanted to bring in a rehab program to rehab the Coops.
Sure.
And they wanted to rehab the Coops, a $13 million rehab program. $13 million today is nothing. But in them, $13 million rehab was something. But they needed the tenants, the bank, and a community organization working together. So they would have The bank they already had.
Yeah.
The landlord they hadn't had yet. But they figured they'd get the landlord once they had the community organization, which was the tenants.
Sure.
I mean, the tenants. They had to have the
Yeah.
tenants. And are you watching something? The cat moving around or something?
Oh, he's swatting at my
Oh,
hand. Um,
he's adorable. He is beautiful.
he
You
knows
want to
it
pick
too.
this up at some other time? Oh, okay.
Oh, no, this is fine. This is fine. Yeah. Yeah, he's just he'll
That's
go
all
away
right. It's a
eventually.
beautiful cat. So, in order to do that, they had to have a tenant organization. And Minnie Calmus would never go along with it because it meant raising the rents. And
Mm.
she just fought the landlord every day, tooth and nail, and nobody would get involved
Oh,
with her. So she wasn't going to do it. So they asked me. So I went ahead and formed another tenant association, which
mm,
caused friction because it knocked hers out. Didn't have two organizations, so I formed a
yeah,
tenant organization, and that way I was able to bring in the rehab. I got the tenants to agree to it, and I got the rehab. Set up. It hadn't
yeah,
gone through, but it was set up, and that was done. And let me see what happened. Yeah, we got the rehab in, and they started to rehab the coops. I was able, and I promised that nobody would be displaced, and because that
sure.
was their main problem. And the equipment could have been better. You know, they had these tin cabinets. So they probably could have been a lot better, I'm sure. But for 13 million, this is what they brought in. But at least they changed the wiring. Because it was 120 and they changed
Yeah.
it to 240. Thank heaven. You couldn't
Oh,
you
that's
couldn't run
yeah.
two toasters or coffee without blowing a fuse, which was down in the basement. But
Yeah.
so that was so they were able to get that, but that was very interesting. Um, also, because as I had mentioned to you sometime before, I had such a fun trying to get buildings landmarked that it went
Yeah.
down into Washington and it sat there for a while. And then the landlord wanted his money for the rehab. So they said, you'll get your money for the rehab if you sign the landmark papers. He was holding it up. He didn't want
Ah,
it. He didn't want the buildings landmarked because that meant he
yeah.
couldn't tear them down or anything. He couldn't change the facade. There were things he couldn't do
Sure.
if it was landmarked. So he wasn't signing the landmark papers. So stayed in
Ah,
limbo for almost a year. But then when he went down and said, look, I want my $13 million to rehab the buildings, they said, fine, you want your 13 million, we'll give you 13 million. You sign the landmark papers. Now that's how I landmark. They sign the landmark papers after the research, because that's a big project. You got to hire someone to come in. They got to
yeah.
prove that for the culture. They got to go through the whole history of the buildings and write it up, and so people could understand it. So he signed the landmark papers, and then it went through, and they called
Wow.
me up, and they said, "Guess what? Brenda, you
Wow. So you you really did so much to get the building rehab, to get it
exactly
landmarked.
when I was going to
Uh,
leave it, I said I can't just walk away because that culture becomes a part of you, and I just can't walk away
yeah.
from it. I just couldn't. It's
ab-
like it could never be done. We did walk away because,
Yeah.
as I said, it was so much a part of my life, and there was so
Yeah.
much there for people should know, you know. And as I said, I just couldn't walk away without doing
For
something.
sure.
And this is the only thing I can
For
think of
sure.
doing was to landmark the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And going back in time again for a little bit, back to I guess around the 40s, maybe 50s. Were your adopted parents ever very active in the Communist Party, or they just believed in some of the
No,
same
they
things?
weren't.
Or
They weren't at all. Mm-hmm.
okay, not at all. What about the American Labor Party? Do you remember anything going on at the Coops about the American
No, there
Labor
were probably
Party?
people that joined it and was a part of it, but that wasn't the main. No.
Yeah. Angie ran on the American Labor Party ticket for state senate for that district in 1949. But it was only really active for a handful of
Right.
years. Uh, but yeah. And what about any prominent African American radicals? Do you remember any coming around the Coops on a regular basis?
No, I don't. As thought I said, with Winston, Henry Winston,
Henry Winston.
we
Yeah,
had his children and wife,
sure.
and what else? And then we had, let's see. But as far as militant people, militant, no.
Yeah. Paul
Yes, Paul
Robeson.
Robeson, they came in once or twice. And
Yeah.
so it didn't restart yet. Let me see. James Earl Jones came around, but nothing, no real fighters, no real noisemakers were,
Sure.
came around in the Coops. That wasn't what it was, because if you're a communist and you're for the rest of the movies, you had to be very quiet. One thing you can't do,
Yeah.
The Black Panthers can make noise, but the people in the Coops can't make that much noise because the FBI will be right down their necks.
Yeah. Do you remember seeing the FBI around the Coop on a regular basis, huh?
They would line up every communist in the Coops had their own FBI assigned to them. So you see in the morning, all from the corner, all the way down, you see these big black cars. The FBI agent, and they sit and wait until their person comes out, and they start to follow them.
Yeah. And I guess among the Black residents of the Coops, Angie was the most militant that you remember,
she was the most militant. She was fighting and angry about everything.
Yeah. Do you have any specific memories about Angie? Did you know her
I kept away
very
from
well?
her because I don't like that loud, aggressive. And remember, I'm growing up in a place I really understand what this is all about. What is she so upset about?
Yeah.
But then, as she said, I don't know what her background is. I don't know what she has seen. She might have seen the racism of putting everyone on the top floor and was really inwardly fighting that. But remember, when I knew Angie, growing up, and I grew up with Angie because Angie was always there, and I was always there. She was always walking in and out of the Coops. But let's see, I really didn't quite understand all the things she was upset about. Like there was this angry, fighting woman that everybody liked because of her fighting spirit, and would go down to her house like once a week for big parties. But that's all, I was in. I wasn't a part of a group.
Yeah.
She never invited me, and my adopted
Sure.
parents weren't a part of the group, so they never went in. So I never got to know her, basically, except she was Charlotte's mother.
Yeah, and they lived on the bottom
Yes,
on the
H1,
bottom
yes,
floor. Is
she
that
was the
right?
only one that had a ground floor apartment.
And you said that some of the other Black families were a little felt a little weird about that. Is that right?
About her having a ground floor apartment?
Yeah. Or maybe not ground floor apartment, but she had a large apartment too, right?
Technically, they said a 3-bedroom apartment. And she was the only person with a 3-bedroom apartment. And as I said to you, I don't think that was really 3 bedrooms. It might have been, but I don't think so. The Coops only had 2 bedrooms, was the biggest. And then she would have had the only apartment with the 3. So I was, I don't know, and I never really saw it. Making noise.
Sure.
Okay.
And why don't you say some more about say your life at the Coops from the mid-50s onwards, because there's obviously a lot more. You raised a whole family at the Coops and all of that. So why don't you get into that?
Yes, I raised 2 girls in the Coops. But by that time, the Coops had changed drastically.
Sure.
And so my 2 girls made friends really outside the Coops. I think they had friends in the Coops. I don't believe they did. Did you have friends in the Coops?
Yeah.
No, they didn't have any friends in the Coops. Outside the Coops.
Yeah.
So. Okay. Yeah. And let's see. As I said, and they're having friends outside the Coops, so it made a whole different. So their friends' ideas and thinkings were not the same. They weren't fighting for people's rights. They weren't marching in May Day parades. And they had a fire drill. They didn't go under the desk. They went under the desk. They didn't, so.
Yeah.
It was a whole different. It was a whole different ball game.
Yeah, but you still went to the White Castle protest. That would have been in 1963,
I'm not quite sure when it was. What the date was? Was it 63? More than I.
I think it was 1963. I know it was the early 60s, but
yes, the White Castle would not hire Blacks, and we didn't think that was right. So we went and we picketed, and we had a big picket line outside. Have you gotten the Times? Have you seen the picture in the Times? So the picture in the Times, and we were picketing, and some of us that went inside to picket, and they turned the heat off, or they turned the air conditioning off. So it's very hot and uncomfortable.
Oh, I see.
They turned the AC off on the strikers. So it was uncomfortable. But we stood there and we came back. I think we did it a couple of days.
Yeah, I think
we had a nice picket line out there. And then finally they gave in and they started hiring Blacks. And that was White Castle.
Yeah. And were there, so aside from yourself, were there other people from the Coops?
The whole group, everyone that was on the benches. That was not there. That was rather than sit on the benches. Let's go pick it White Castle. Why not?
Yeah.
Everybody. We all went on the line. We all,
Yeah.
Why sit on the bench today? We go pick it. Let's go pick it White Castle.
Were there other civil rights protests that you remember in the Bronx, either around that time or earlier?
the rent when people couldn't pay rent, and the marshals were coming to dispossess them. The marshal would take the furniture down, and the progressives would bring the furniture back up. And the marshals would take it down, and the people would bring it up. And finally, the marshals got tired and walked away. So that was that. But I don't remember the protests, but there were a lot of them. They were during the war, with the Korean War.
Yeah.
We made sure we had boxes of food for the communist side. I always forget which one is the communist side, the North or the South. Whichever was the communist side, that's the side we were on. Of course, the Americans were fighting the other side. We were for the communist side. And they needed food, so we went up in the coops with our boxes and collected canned goods and sent canned goods to the communist side. And let's see, whatever was happening at the time, you know, when they found the 3 civil rights workers murdered in the South, do you remember that? What happened there? If they had a protest or a walk-in or anything, we were there. You know? So I don't remember all the protests, but whatever it was, we were there.
Yeah. And I guess by the 60s, probably a lot of the people who were still participating in protests might not have called themselves communist anymore, huh? Yeah. And do you remember if in the late 60s, early 70s, if the Black Power movements made any headway in the Coops, or that was mostly, I know kind of a little north of the Coops, like Edenwald, the Black Panthers had a presence up there. But did they in the Coops at all?
In the Coops. No, anyone who wanted to join went outside the Coops to join. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just about that time, the drugs were coming into the Coops. But they went outside.
I see. Yeah, so I know Angie
Wait a second.
organized.
Just wait 1 second.
What's that? Yeah, I was just gonna say before you got up, I know Angie organized some events in support of the Black Panthers, but I think she might have been one of the only kind of links of continuity between older generations of radicalism and younger generations at the Coops anyway. I guess there really wasn't much of a link.
I think my daughter Patty was a part of the. You were part of the Black Power movement, Patricia? Huh?
What do you mean a part of?
You must explain what I mean by a part of.
Well, hopefully the FBI is not listening. I know. So Charlotte was friends with like a Afeni Shakur, but she was never a part of the Black Panthers. But she was close with some of them. So I imagine there's some of that. I mean, you know, especially if you had friends outside the Coops, I imagine it'd be hard not to know some people who were pretty active. But yeah. Anyway, and let me see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We've covered so much ground. Are there other things you'd like to share, just in general, things that have occurred to you, or things I haven't asked? Anything?
I think back on how times have changed. Like this morning, I was thinking about this interview, and I was thinking about how times have changed. And I mention to my daughters all the time. When on Allerton Avenue on White Plains used to be like a supermarket, A&P. And
yeah.
When Patty was born, you know, I'd wheel her in the carriage, and then I'd go shopping in A&P, and I'd leave her outside to sleep in the carriage, and go in to shop. We came out, and she'd be so late. You wouldn't today.
Yeah.
You wouldn't leave your kid in a
I
carriage
know.
today and go into a store and shop. I don't see that today. I don't see
It's
that
true,
today.
yeah.
So we miss that. We miss that.
That's
You know, we
true.
used to go right in and shop when we could, you know, outside. What's the matter? Oh, and you know, you think about how things have changed. We used to talk to other people's kids. Oh, that we did all the time. That's something that is something that I don't know if
Yeah.
it's a Bronx thing, maybe not, or it's a Coop thing. But every adult talks to your kid. You gotta tell your mother
Yeah, yeah.
if they see you doing something wrong.
Yeah.
You're gonna tell your mother. And they tell him to get out of the street. You don't play in the street. You see you smoking.
Yeah.
You tell your mother you're smoking. Oh, don't tell my mother. I want to see you smoking. Like Patty, did they tell on you?
Oh, it all the time.
She says they tell on her all the time. All the time they tell on her. You don't have that today. Oh, that's right. That's right. Patty mentioned something
What's
to
that?
me very, very good. She remembers. I forgot. The Coops has has anyone ever told you about the underground tunnels?
I heard about them, but
Okay.
no one said much
You
about
can
them.
go from one end of the Coops. You can go from one end of the Coops to the other underground. Underground tunnels all
Wow.
throughout the Coops. If you know how to get
Wow.
through, you can go all the way. Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yes,
That's pretty
yes.
amazing. I
And
mean,
when of course, in the 60s and the 70s, when you did have some crime in there and the police were called to come in,
yeah.
they wouldn't go into the cellar because they knew that the kids running
Oh,
in there knew how the underground tunnel went. Please do.
mm,
And they had fire doors to run through the tunnels.
oh,
So what the kids would do is that if the police were chasing them, they'd run through the tunnels and kick the fire doors, and the fire doors would snap closed. Police would go into it. And once those doors were like steel, you couldn't open them. They would go right through
yeah, yeah.
and get
Wow.
stuck in between. So the police, once you went in the cellar, police would go back.
Yeah.
But
Did people ever
you
hide
would
out
go
from the
from one
FBI
end to
down
the
there?
other underground. Yes.
Wow. Did um did Henry Winston hide out in the
No, they
underground tunnels
welcomed him.
when
He
he was
stayed in the
being
apartment. We
chased? Or?
welcomed him, and him and his kids and his
Yeah, yeah.
had an apartment there. And
I
no,
see. Yeah, yeah.
they welcomed them in. They didn't have to hide. Once they were in there, they wouldn't let the police in there. They couldn't take them out.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Did you spend any
No,
any
I
time in
didn't
the
go in the
tunnels
cellar.
ever?
It wasn't. It was scary
Yeah,
down
yeah,
there.
yeah. I bet. I bet.
Clean. The cells were clean. I don't ever
Uh,
remember them being over dirty. They were clean.
yeah, yeah.
And we had dumb
Um,
waiters, which was very
and so,
interesting. Dumb waiters.
oh,
We had
dumbwaiter
dumb
too.
waiters, all the
Wow.
apartments.
And no laundry in apartments though, right? People would have to
Right,
go to
no
the
laundry.
laundromat, right?
Yeah. The washing machines, the
Yeah, yeah.
dryers.
Um,
They didn't have the plumbing for it. They didn't have the
oh,
plumbing.
sure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And uh, so you moved out, if I remember correctly,
86,
1985, is that
maybe
right?
87, in that area.
Yeah. Did you live on the top
Yes.
floor still at that point, or? Okay, yeah. I'm sure it got harder and harder to walk up the
Yeah, I
5
don't
flights of
do it today,
stairs.
but I'd probably be in better shape, so. Because I went back and exercise every day. I don't have
Yeah,
today,
it's
so
true.
I think they did us a favor.
Uh, um, and your children had already moved out before you
Yes.
then, right? Yeah, yeah. Um, so so yeah, I think that about covers it, at least from things I can think of. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Anything
I
else that
can't,
occurs to you at the moment?
I can't think of anything else. I was trying to get together, I forgot a list of people who were also in the Coops, who also lived in the Coops, famous
Yeah,
people. Um, I don't know if I have a list. I'll search around to see. Uh, the reason I
yeah,
might have a list is because when I was both landmarking the building and I wrote to all the people I could think of, to universities also, and to people for their support. So I may have then sat down and had to think. So I may have that list. And when I sent in for the rehab,
sure.
I did the same thing, you know. So I really have
Yeah, yeah.
that list of people that I think famous people that had lived in the Coops or stayed. I know Pete Seeger was in the Coops a lot.
Oh, oh, I
And I
see.
have a
Yeah,
letter
yeah. That
from
makes
him
sense.
because I sent him the landmark papers and he thanked me for it. So he sent me a very
Yeah.
nice thank you note, which I framed by the way,
Wow.
you know, and
Wow, yeah.
so that I have framed. I'm trying to find the picture of Paul Robeson.
And you with two other girls, right?
Yeah,
You were
I
a
was about
teenager or you were
10.
younger?
Yeah.
10. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I'm looking for that too.